Well, it's less about the show, more about the practice. My
Okay.
practice is called Elevated Recovery. We do recovery coaching, even though we don't use the term recovery, we use the term rebooting, and we
Okay.
primarily work with business owners and professionals who struggle with sexually compulsive behaviors.
Okay.
Our focus is high speed internet pornography, and we
Yep.
work with these individuals mainly because just due to their perceived status. Um, in society, in their church, in whatever environment they're in, there's a lot of shame.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally, I struggled with this behavior for about 11 years. Been rebooted for 14 years and 4 months right now, and
Okay.
I've ran my practice for since 2012. So that's we're going into our 11th year of doing
Okay.
this. Yeah, so we have a flagship program. It's called Porn Reboots. And we got a couple of hundred clients. We work with them on ending the out of control behavior with pornography.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, our clients are already educated on the dangers of pornography, and we work with them to get them to a point where they can rewire their brain, rebuild intimacy with their partners, and kind of move on from the traditional recovery perspective of you're once an addict, always an addict. I think that could apply for some individuals based on their brain chemistry. But for our typical clients, they rewire their brain within a year and a half to 2 years following our system.
Okay.
And the whole idea is to be able to move on with your life and realize that you don't need pornography and you don't need this intense sexual stimuli to be happy. So that's what we do, man.
Okay. Well, that's very needed for certain. Um, so, what are tell me about the process. I mean, let's just keep going. We'll just keep talking, and this is the show. So,
Yeah, yeah,
what about the
yeah. That's all good,
process?
man. I really like that. This is not alcohol, by the way. This this is my aminos.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Sometimes people are
Hey,
like, hey, dude. I was like, I just like
I'll go.
drinking
Let me
my.
put something in this then, so I can join you.
Yeah. I assume you probably run across this sometimes in your practice, or probably a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
But the system we use is called the porn reboot system. And Corey, the reason that we use reboot instead of recover is because traditional recovery, I feel that for high speed internet pornography, it's a little bit outdated.
Okay.
Recovery conjures up this idea of the things you've lost to this out of control behavior, and you want to, you want to recover them. You want to bring them back. You want to go back to who you were. But let's say you were working with a client who began his out of control behavior when he was 16, 17 years old, and it escalated over the years. Now he's in his early to mid 30s. He's a professional. He's got 1.5 kids, and he wants to end this behavior because he's like, I'm not being a great dad. I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling with porn-induced erectile dysfunction. My marriage is becoming sexless, and there's just so much. My partner's struggling with betrayal trauma because she's found out about my secret behavior. Now he wants to recover that which he lost,
Right.
but he's not the same young man that he
Right.
was.
Right.
So our concept of rebooting is to hit the reset button, just like you would reboot a computer, and it's to re-examine your values because a lot of your values and standards as a man who struggles with an out of control behavior are unfortunately colored by your behavior, your view
Okay.
of intimacy, the way you feel you should, your desire for sex, what you think is appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
all of that is impacted.
Absolutely.
What we call your arousal template is impacted by your behavior with pornography. And so the system is pretty simple. We focus on changing your habits first. And there's a lot of like pop psychology out there on changing habits, and there are lots of people helping people to quit porn, and it just ends at the habit. But it's
Right.
not about a habit.
Right.
You've got to change your habits. But in order for that habit to stay on in your life, Corey, you've also got to change your lifestyle. It
Okay.
has to change. Like your lifestyle also involves changing your environment, not just your physical environment, but also your online environment. Where are you hanging out? Are you constantly browsing through Instagram? And then suddenly you're getting triggered? Are you on TikTok? Are you on OnlyFans? What are you doing?
Right.
Now, once you've changed the lifestyle, that's good enough. Some really good recovery programs do that, but then they end up using willpower to maintain it. Day by day, hang out with the right people, and so on. That's fine. People can live that way. Um, I believe that families should live an adventurous life. I'm not a big fan of the black and white, gray kind of life. I think we can do a lot of amazing things. And
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that, we have to change our self image. The
Okay.
image you have yourself of yourself as a man who is dependent on pornography. The image you have of yourself, all the strong emotions and unresolved issues that you were medicating with your
Mm-hmm.
out of control behavior,
Mm-hmm.
those things need to be addressed. You need to find out if there's any trauma that you are medicating or anesthetizing with sexual behavior. And once your self-image has changed, you become a man who no longer needs it.
Right.
And I could just keep going on.
No, I get it, but so explain, JK, explain to me
Yeah.
um, the high speed porn aspect, because I've come across this too. But I think what sets you apart is um, there's a different thing that happens with that aspect versus, I grew up with magazines
Mm.
and then occasionally videos because the internet wasn't around when I was introduced to porn.
Uh-huh.
So it's one of those, but high speed is a whole different beast.
It is. Dude, how old are you?
I'm 51.
Oh my God, you look good for 51. I was just thinking, I was like, okay, he's got to be like maybe like 42,
No,
43.
I'm
All
51.
right,
Yep.
taking care of yourself. No, that's good. I'm 39. I grew up with not much internet, honestly. I was exposed to it by a Playboy that my parents, I guess she was a nanny. She had this laying around and I picked it up. And I was about 8 years old and, hadn't hit puberty. And
Mm-hmm.
when I picked it up, it was as if there was this explosion in my brain. It wasn't sexual, but I knew it was naughty. I knew
Right.
I was not supposed to see that. And
Right.
there was this just adrenaline rush and the taboo nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got hooked on that rush. And so I continued looking at those naughty pictures whenever I could until I hit puberty and I learned how to masturbate. And then I was like, I was 14 years old. I realized what the deal was. But the high speed part is very dangerous. A brief history of it is that pornography was already addictive, but it didn't become as widespread as it is now till about 2006. And that was the advent of YouTube. Now, once YouTube came about, everything changed. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
all the tube sites out there are actually based on YouTube. It was an algorithm that could allow people to switch from genre to genre quite easily. Back in the day, it was so difficult. The problem with pornography is that high speed internet pornography addiction is that it is accessible and it is very anonymous. So
Yep.
you can just pick up your phone and it's right
Yep.
there. It's anonymous, nobody can catch you. Back in the day, you had to go across town, make sure nobody saw you, get the magazine, come back across town, or get the
Yep.
VHS. I remember the VHS days.
Oh yeah, I do too.
You know, late night cable quickly followed through, and you could still get caught with the VHS.
Mm-hmm.
You could leave it in there. Late night cable. Somebody turns on the light. What are you doing, Billy? You're like, oh.
Right.
But the high speed internet part was with YouTube. Once that started, um, men started becoming hooked on it.
Okay.
Because let's take a quick pivot to fantasy, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Um, there's nothing wrong with fantasy. It's absolutely healthy. The thing people fear about fantasy is that others will discover their fantasy and judge them based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, what pornography did was that it took all those fantasies and recreated them. And so now individuals had the ability to jump from fantasy to fantasy,
Right.
and they kept doing it. So your brain rewires because eventually it begins to believe that that is the way to engage in sex. Most men who view pornography, I tell my clients when they come in, when they're getting a little bit lost, I'm like, do you know that you have seen more naked people and more sex than all your ancestors put together. All your ancestors, they haven't seen as
Right.
much as you have. And they
Right.
just go like, oh my God. I was like, do you think you evolved to
Right.
consume that much pornography? And they're like, no.
Yeah. That's a sobering thought
It really is, man.
to realize what you're exposed to. And that's the other thing I'd heard too was on the high speed, um, it allows for the continual stimulation, like you're describing, of okay, this isn't doing it for me. So one click, now I get a different hit and a different taboo, like you're describing when you were first introduced to it. Because mine would have been a similar one of the feelings I didn't understand, but I liked them. And so wait, as soon as that starts to wane, whoa, I can just click over here now and then click over here and click over here. And it allowed, it just, the brain's not meant to wire. It doesn't work that way. I mean, when you're with a person, it doesn't work that way. So,
Exactly, Corey. And that's the reason why men struggle from what's called porn-induced erectile dysfunction,
mm-hmm.
which basically happens when, your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, whomever you're being intimate with, she cannot be five women at the same time,
Right.
right? She cannot be flawless either, right? She's got flaws, she's got stretch marks, she's got all these things. You lose the ability to find the beauty in that. I talk to
Yeah.
clients and I'm just like, you do know that some of those things are sexy, and they're like, what? They are? I'm like, yeah. If you can't
Yeah.
look at your wife and you can't find all those little things beautiful, I was just like, you got work to do. And they're
Yeah.
just shocked. They're like, "Oh my God!" But like, I was having sex with her the other day, and I hear the craziest things. And she had I found myself wishing she was more tan because I could see her veins, right? And is that weird? Because I thought that was gross. I was like, you do know that we're more or less. I was like, we're human, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
we're to use a crude term, we're meat suits, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you saw something human and you got disgusted by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained to them that what pornography does, high speed internet pornography does, is that it exaggerates everything. It is
Right.
actors, people acting, and your partner cannot be all those things at one time. So when men continually condition themselves to these unrealistic images and scenarios, their brain gets used to it and they try to recreate that in their lives. The way the process typically works is that when a man gets sexually aroused, he typically releases testosterone. When you look at a lot of the science, you'll find them talking about dopamine, 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 which is nice and it's the next thing. But the precursor to dopamine is testosterone. They're actually synergistic. And once you've released some testosterone, you then release dopamine. And what dopamine does in the process is that it gives you this urge to resolve it. So you're just like, I want to experience that pleasure. That's what dopamine actually does. It doesn't actually give you pleasure, it gives you the urge to resolve that feeling for pleasure. But then you keep chasing it because
Mm-hmm.
you've got multiple tabs open and you're watching this scene, but suddenly on the sideline or however it works right now, I'll use YouTube as an example, something else that's better comes up. And so you're like, okay, 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 I'm not going to ejaculate or orgasm to this. I'm going to go to the next thing. And
Right.
what happens is you end up creating more dopamine receptors than you actually need. The next thing that comes after that is norepinephrine, which is released from your adrenal glands. And it's kind of like a cousin to adrenaline. It's you want to consider it to be like a videographer. It's the guy who's like keeping track of the entire story,
Right.
right? And once norepinephrine is released, right after that, you have all these other endogenous opiates that are released when you orgasm. And the biggest issue with this when it comes to high speed internet is that those endogenous opiates are released when you orgasm, but you train yourself over and over again to delay that. When
Okay.
you delay it by viewing different types of pornography and different
Right.
genres, when you
Right.
end up with your partner, you're unable to do that. And
Yeah.
you're wondering, your penis is like, dude,
Yeah.
it's like a gummy worm. It's not working. It's like, what's happening? And it's like I hope
Very
this
descriptive there.
isn't.
It's very descriptive there, sir.
I apologize. I don't know.
No,
I listened to
it's
some episodes. I didn't know how
it's
descript.
accurate. No,
Okay.
it's accurate because it's also one of those things that your brain in a lot of ways seems to just get bored or distracted, or it's not feeding like you could in the other arena that you're spending time with the high speed, where no woman can change scenes like that or has the things that could be quote unquote a turn off, when in reality, no, it's part of a beautiful aspect of a story together. If it's a long-term relationship, the standard of beauty is your spouse,
Mm.
because you've created life with that person too. And life will change and gravity will take over and wrinkles will come in and skin spots will happen and veins will be seen. And depending on how you orient towards that, I think of that as that's just sexy, because we have started living life. Look at what we've created. Look at what we've done. Look at who we are. That's when it starts to get good. But you're describing an element of it almost makes that gap even harder to bridge if my standard has been high speed porn.
Absolutely. I love what you just said about what we've created together and that shared journey. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that a lot of men lose while they're in their relationship. You miss
Mm-hmm.
out on what is happening with your partner moment to moment because you're
Mm-hmm.
living in a fantasy world. And you wake up one day to realize like you lost all the tiny little bits. And the worst part is you don't even know you lost it.
Right. Right. Okay. So they've you've got the habits in place. You've got the kind of the rebooting of my sense of self and my identity.
Mhm.
Are there other aspects?
Those are the three things. There's a process to
Okay.
it. So the first part is the habits part. The habits
Okay.
part are pretty simple. It's really building habits to, first of all, manage your emotions. And that's very important because a lot of men, when men are using pornography, they're usually using it to either deal with stress,
Mm-hmm.
to deal with some sort of unresolved issue, or to manage very strong emotions. And when you start doing this, when let's say you're a teenager, your brain's still developing, you don't really have any coping strategies, then what happens is your emotions kind of freeze in place. Certain emotions, right? So maybe you were in a family where, let's say there was shame in your family. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
a random scenario on the surface, mom and dad made it look like you guys were a perfect middle class suburban family. But the truth is that behind closed doors, there was alcoholism, there was
Yeah.
bankruptcy, there were all these things. So you lived with a secret, for example, and that was shameful, but everyone made you do that. And then pornography came into your life and it became the thing that you used to deal with that secret. When mom and dad were yelling and screaming, when you came back from school knowing that y'all were going to move to a different state because y'all couldn't afford it, you used porn. Now you never resolve that. And
Right.
you get into adulthood, and every morning you wake up, and because it's piled up over the years, you start feeling shame with the most random things, right? You're with
Yeah.
your wife and she says, "Hey honey, let's, do you want to move to another neighborhood?" Or she talks about that and suddenly you're triggered. And you don't know why, but
Right.
then you end up using pornography. So these are some of the things we talk about with clients. Well, we have them start their day with taking a moment to feel. A lot of guys just wake up and they're go go go, or they have some,
Right.
like the more successful guys have some gung ho morning routine, which is fine. But I tell guys to slow down and start focusing on your emotions. You can use a simple feelings exercise like
Mm-hmm.
a statement, like I feel, and a lot of men who struggle with this behavior feel nothing. They don't feel anything. They're like, I
Right.
feel numb. And I'm sure you have some clients like this, right? Just
Yeah.
yeah, I feel numb and I don't feel anything, JK. I'm like, that's okay. Keep doing it. Start with the physical sensations, and I feel tired, and then I feel irritated. I feel annoyed. This exercise that JK gave me is like stupid. I want to do it. It's a stupid exercise. I don't want to do it. Is this
Right.
even going to work? I was like, that's right.
Right.
That's fine. Write that down. I feel this exercise is stupid. But eventually they'll start finding I feel irritated. I first remember feeling irritated when, and I encourage them to go back further and further. So
Okay.
that's all you need to do in the morning. They start with a habit like that. Then they also start with setting good boundaries. Now, the definition we have of a boundary is different from what traditional addiction recovery has. And this has to do with the habit aspect of this, which is in traditional recovery, a boundary is where you don't cross this. It's like a line. It's like a border. But the thing is, the human brain is very interesting. One of our principles is work with your brain, don't work against your brain.
Okay.
And working against your brain would be saying, "Oh, that's a boundary," and your brain says, "Yeah, therefore we have to break the boundary." But the definition we have of a boundary is where something which is good for you ends and where something that is undesirable for you begins.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more flexible. That way you can check in with yourself and go like, "Oh, if I continue down this path, the good things stop and the undesirable begins." So you
Okay.
set habits with your boundaries. So you're like, okay, I was on Instagram for a little bit, or I was at a work meeting. Everything was cool. And then there was this pretty lady that started speaking. Okay, nothing wrong with that. All right. I noticed that she's a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Fine. Now, that's good behavior. Undesirable behavior begins when you're like, you know what? Let me check her out on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Check her out. Like, let me just check her out on Facebook, maybe, and that's where you start going
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of the habit part. We build habits around little things like that.
Okay. That's perfect. So I guess you made a comment that you work with people and it's usually a year or two, year
Yeah.
and a half, 2 years, and that's kind of what it takes for the whole reboot process to really get deep in and transformational.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I struggled with this behavior, I went to traditional 12-step programs. I was raised as a Catholic and I went to Christian approaches. I did the whole woo woo thing. I did a lot of deep meditation. I did a lot of breath work when it was weird to do it,
Mm-hmm.
like 14, 15 years ago. And while some of those things helped, I kept feeling that I had to live with this forever. And most of the places I went framed it as a battle, especially the religious parts. It was like a battle with this other part of yourself. And that
Yeah.
was so difficult for me, Corey, because um, my understanding of it was that it wasn't, I felt the battle was keeping it, making this process longer. I think it was taking years because you're fighting
Right.
this enemy.
Right.
I had realized that whatever this thing was, it was something that developed to protect me. It was something that I was using pornography to protect me from pain, from strong feelings, from stress. And compassion was where it began. It was to begin to stop hating that aspect of myself and realizing that it was okay. It was biological. It developed to protect me. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to make peace with it first in order to move forward. The
Okay.
moment a man starts doing this, he's already cutting off years from the
Yeah.
process because he's learning to love himself. He's
Yeah.
learning to embrace his shadow. I have all my clients begin the process with writing a thank you and a goodbye letter to pornography. And the thank you part is to take a moment to actually appreciate what it did for you. A very simple thing could be for some men, they're like, I did not know what a vagina was. The only way I knew where to insert my penis was thanks to pornography. And if not for that, I wouldn't have known because the biology books just
Right.
didn't weren't graphic enough. Um, Pornography helped me out when I had no coping strategies. It was a pretty cool thing. I learned about my body. I learned about
Mm-hmm.
sexuality. And they go through all those positive things. And then they write a goodbye letter, which could be along the tone of, you've been very helpful to me. You helped me when I was a boy, when I was a young man, but you've been in my life for too long. Like, I
Yeah.
met this wonderful human being and I want to
Yeah.
be with her. but our relationship has to end because she's going to provide me with everything. And the rest of the things, I have to learn how to develop them myself. And this is so critical to the reboot process because when you love yourself as you go through this, for example, in traditional recovery is if you slip or you relapse,
Yeah.
we're going to start from day one again. No,
Yeah.
no, it's your slips and your relapses are data. That's
Yeah.
all it is. And if you're
Absolutely.
learning from the data, your brain does rewire. But if you're hitting the reset button and climbing up that ladder again, you're reinforcing shame and
Yeah.
guilt and all those negative emotions. So I didn't know about the 1.5 to 2 year thing. It took me about 18 months, even though I had tried for years, using a system I put together. And it was probably about the 7th year of running elevated recovery that I started checking back in with clients. I was very scared to do it, to be honest, because I was just like, oh my God, what if they relapsed? And almost all my clients were good.
Right.
And that was a huge revelation to me. And I just realized that everybody, the max amount of time it took using this system, habits, lifestyle, and self-image. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it's just an easy way to understand it.
Yeah.
It 1.5 years to maximum of 2 years, their brain rewired. And what this means is that they could be accidentally exposed to pornography, but it
Right.
would not have an impact on them. They
Right.
didn't need it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of
Yeah.
how the 1 to 2 year process works.
Yeah. That's the description of it's not 100% clean in how I'm living life because I can't always avoid the temptations, the struggle, the areas that what comes at me, I have very little influence over. I can in the lifestyle aspect, right? I can put myself in situations where, don't go hang out on the cesspool of that site because I know where that could lead me. That's just good judgment. But I love what you're describing in the sense that when I come to grips with a different relationship with myself, and even though I love the way you phrase this, I don't hear this too much and my relationship I had with pornography, I don't go immediately, that's just all shame. It's a bad and destructive thing. Yes. But I don't need to heap on shame to it. And it's recognizing there's this dilemma of, I can then be exposed to something. I'm in a movie and, there's a sex scene and it's like, okay. But I don't stay there like I would have. That's kind of what you're describing then, right? It's like, it doesn't take me down the whole, oh, what was her name? I'm finding her later and blah, 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 blah. Instead, it was just, oh, all right. And then you just keep on moving with the scenes.
Boom. Exactly.
Okay.
You don't, it doesn't carry on, but most importantly, you come to realize what healthy sexuality is.
Yeah.
And a lot of men do not know what healthy sexuality is. And I actually feel very bad for a lot of young men these days because they grow up in a culture where long-term relationships are not viewed as the norm.
Yeah.
Sex is prioritized over everything. And, when it comes to the whole recovery process, just to change gears a little bit, there's this idea of perfectionism. Like you must be perfect in your recovery in order to end this behavior.
Yeah.
Right? The right way to end this behavior is to be human. It was Dr. Albert Ellis, the founder of rational emotive behavioral therapy, who said we can all
One of my
recover.
favorites. Yeah,
Oh,
one of my
okay,
favorites.
Cool. So you're an Albert Ellis fan, as am
Yep.
I. Big fan of it. He said all of us can recover from our addictive behaviors, but none of us can recover from being human.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was just like, yeah, that's how this is going to work for me. Just accepting our flaws, accepting that we're going to fall. That's the way you that's actually the way you do everything in life. So I don't understand why some methodologies stress perfection,
Yeah, that's just self-love, right? And self-grace and graciousness towards my, my humanness, my flaws, the flesh, everything. That
I love that word, grace. It's not one I use often, but I like it. Yeah.
Denying its existence doesn't help anything. right?
No, it doesn't. It
So,
doesn't.
man, so tell people how they can find you as we wrap up this segment.
Well, my name is, I have a long name, but everyone calls me JK Emezi. You can find me at elevatedrecovery.org. You can search for our podcast called the Porn Reboot Podcast. So just Google us or just search for us on YouTube. Just search for Porn Reboots and you'll see my face all over the place and some crazy
Perfect.
thumbnails.
Well, man, thank you so much for thus far. I want to pivot though in the extended